Hey there, thanks Javier. Thanks so much for the awesome introduction you just gave us. Um, Good morning, good evening, or good night, wherever you are. I know I'm right now in Frankfurt and it's pouring outside. So what I could say is what a fabulous day for the cloud, right? And especially for the cloud identity conversation we're about to have. I did see that a bunch of you are IT professionals. I did see that a bunch of you do have experience and the other half more or less does not have so much experience with Azure. So the point being is right now I am going to delve into the entire conversation of Azure Active Directory and any extra features which come with that. As Javier mentioned, I am Alex Mang. I'm one of the very passionate Azure MVPs. I really love the cloud, and I've been loving it ever since it came out when it was still a baby, a small thing. And back in the day, if you actually want to think about history and things like that, in terms of identity, I can always relate to the on-premises Active Directory, how it was so useful to have an ALDAP protocol to store our usernames, our passwords, our credentials, our computers, everything like that. But then when the story about the cloud came out, no matter what the provider was, we still wanted to have that same single sign-on experience, the same seamless way for us to log in without remembering a bunch of other passwords, other usernames, and so on and so forth, with other policies, with other password refresh or password resets rules or whatever the admin wanted to do. And here came Azure Active Directory, which back in the days was more or less of only a dictionary of usernames and passwords, and that's what basically it, which was useful mostly for the software as a service offering Microsoft was providing, especially Office 365. And I'll be honest with you guys, if you already have an Office 365 offering and you don't use Azure for whatever means, whether VMs or whatever the case, you already have an Azure Active Directory, even though you don't have an Azure subscription. Now, this might sound fishy, but just trust me, it's the way it works, because the Azure Active Directory, while still an Azure service, is the special kind of service which you will link towards your Azure subscription, as if the Azure Active Directory were to came first, if you want to do an analogy with the chicken and the chicken egg, whichever came first. But then again, it's so much more than that. It's so much more than just another set of username and passwords, because there is the idea of having a hybrid implementation of a hybrid environment where your on-premises credentials will also work for the cloud environment, for Azure Active Directory. And the cool thing about it's not only the services Microsoft is offering to use those and take advantage of those username and passwords and offer you the single sign-on experience, and basically your users the single sign-on experience. It's also for your own apps. Basically, you can secure your own apps, whether those are internet applications or applications facing external customers. They can all be secured by the same super awesome Azure Active Directory. So, and obviously, even on top of that, you can also even offer self-service environments and offerings for your customers so they can reset their passwords. You can take advantage of premium features such as multi-factor authentication. So you can have your applications request the user to actually provide another set of credentials or tokens to make sure that the user is whoever he claims to be, right? Now, why am I saying Azure is so awesome? It's mostly because of these numbers. And I'll be honest with you guys. It's one of these slides which are so hard to keep up to date with, because those numbers keep on growing and growing and growing each and every single week. For example, top of the Fortune 500 companies, and not only the top, but the very vast majority, 90% that is, are using right now the Microsoft Cloud in one way or another. And because they're either using Azure or Office 365 or Power BI or Dynamics CRM, whatever the case, they're already using Azure Active Directory as well. And right now, there are over 10 million Azure Active Directories running within Azure, which basically means that there are almost 1 billion user accounts created inside Azure Active Directory. Now, just imagine you being responsible for an application which holds a table of usernames of 1 billion usernames? Oh my God, that's crazy. I mean, that's not even comprehensible if you ask me, right? How many authentications do happen every day? 1.3 billion authentications each and every single day. These numbers just show you how big the system is, how large it scales, and taking advantage and bringing those values and those numbers down to securing your own applications is just one of the awesome features the service can do. And then again, Azure Active Directory also gets you involved in order to manage your organization relationship with your customers or with the organization's customers or citizens or whatever the case, because there's some special offerings which we call B2C, business consumer, or B2B, which stands for business to business. Now, when it comes to the linking stuff I was telling you earlier, that's a bit of technical caveat, so to say. So you will have to log into your Azure subscription as an admin. Then you'll have to go to your Azure Active Directory, which will be basically represented as an Azure service. Or what you could also alternatively do, create a new Azure Active Directory and create the custom create button option, and then select an existing directory. And there are basically a few steps you will have to take. And don't worry, these are all very well documented. You don't have to write this slide down on Notepad or anything like that. But it's very important for you to remember that the Azure Active Directory is more or less underneath the entire system in the cloud ecosystem Microsoft offers. And it's I honestly strongly believe that it's because of that Azure Active Directory that Microsoft really ends up being one of the greatest partners there is, because they can offer you a truly hybrid system and a truly identity as a service, if you want to think of it like that. No other provider is capable of giving you the seamless hybrid experience Microsoft is offering. Now, this entire system and the entire Azure Active Directory works on a few protocols which you might already know, like OAuth 2.0, for example, which is more or less of a simple mechanism for end users to grant third-party access to their data and their resources without sharing their actual username or password and things like that, right? It also enables the user to grant access to limited to the scope and to the duration of that particular authorization. It's basically, you already know it, if you're using Facebook, Google, Twitter, or any other very popular social provider out there, they're already taking, most likely they're already taking advantage of the OAuth 2.0 protocol. Now, for the Office 365 APIs, the way the system works, if you were to think of it like in this diagram over here, on the left side, those are your end users. They will open up using a web browser, probably the most favorite one, Edge. They will just visit the website. That's the client itself. And when they will visit the app or the website, they will access the application, which eventually will have to be logged in. And then the website just redirects the user over to a specific URL. And the URL is, again, specific to Azure AD. And that's the authorization server. They will send there, once they're redirected, they will type in their username and password, they will log in, the system will require them to consent the privileges the application has configured and has defined as a property when the application was spinned up and configured as a service principal. I will explain all those terms in a minute, so don't worry about that. They will consent. They will say, yes, I accept this application to have access to my email address, which is private and things like that. They will grant the access, as I was saying, and then the system returns the authorization code. The authorization code is returned, and the user is redirected back to the application. The application gathers the authorization code, and with the authorization code, alongside with an application ID and application secret, is sending another request over to the authorization server. Why does it do that, you might ask? Well, it's this request actually with a special token called the authorization code, as I was saying, which will retrieve a set of other tokens called the access token and the refresh token. And it's the access token which basically gives you access to the secret which you're trying to preserve or to secure down. In this case, your SharePoint Online resource server, right? And there again, there's the response returned with the actual values you were requesting, and the website does, and the web server part of the system talks on behalf of the user because of the entire OAuth 2.0 protocol. Now, it does seem easy at the beginning, but there's some technical details I still want to cover. So let's delve into those. First and foremost, the concept of an application, because this, for whatever reason, seems to be fairly complex to understand, even though it's a seamless. It's easy. It's pretty easy once you get the good understanding, the basic understanding of it. Any application that you develop will. The official term is a service principal. Any application that you develop has to be registered within the directory. Inside Facebook, you're registering your applications as a Facebook user or as a Facebook client. Inside Google, it's the same thing. Inside Twitter, it's the same thing. It's also with Azure Active Directory. So you're registering your application, and those applications will receive an application ID and an application secret, which used to be called the client ID and the client secret back in the day, which is basically the service principal. There's a service principal name, there's a server secret, and that's it. Now, once the application is registered, and it doesn't matter what type of application it is, it can just as well be a web app, it can be a console app, it can be a native app, it can be a Windows service, whatever the case. Once the application is registered, that application ID and application secret represent sort of the username and password of this unmanned, of the service basically, of a non-human being, of a system which has to log in to get access to some secrets, to some resources. Applications, the Azure AD, are assigned these credentials, the client ID or the application ID and the key or the secret I was telling you earlier. There's a lot of documentation, and there's a lot of things you can twiggle around with and mingle around with. And I will show you very few demos, very cool demos actually, on how to get started and how to get a better understanding of the system itself. Now, when you will register, there are 3 different ways to register an application as a service principal inside Azure AD. There is the concept of a Graph 1.0 API, and I will explain what that is. There is also the concept of a Graph 2.0 application, and the registration process basically is like this. 1, there is the old management portal. The Azure Management Portal is what we usually want to call it. You just go down to your Azure Active Directory account. Then you open up that within the window. Then you go over to the Applications tab, and you just register another application from the navigation bar, and that's it. What you see here on the slide is basically a set of applications with no name whatsoever. They were just stripped out, published by Microsoft. Then the second option is by using the Ibiza portal, the newer Azure portal, the one which offers you the more modern experience and sort of more or less smooths out the experience throughout the Azure ecosystem. Basically, you do the same thing, just to remember that they are using different labels and different terms for the same thing. So rather than using the concept of an application ID in the management portal, the old one, it was called an client ID. It's still the same thing. Don't worry about that. And then again, it's the Graph 2.0 application, which is under the apps.dev.microsoft.com URL. I know, too many URLs to remember, but still. And you will register here an application, and you'll see all the different list of applications, no matter whether you're using a Microsoft account or a work organizational account. This is supported for both web apps and native apps. There's a lot of things to go through, and there's just not enough time for me to cover all of those. So just hang around tight, because there's still some technical details to discuss. What's this Graph API 1.0 and 2.0? Basically, here are some links I will really urge you to look into, because the thing is more or less a history lesson, if you really think about it. When they started creating the Graph API for the very first versions of Azure Active Directory, the problem was each and every team of a product within Microsoft ending up creating a set of endpoints for their own service, such as the SharePoint Online team was doing their own set of endpoints, so that you can, with your own set of username and password, with your own credentials, part of the Azure Active Directory, request, filter, and query data. The Exchange Online team was doing the same thing, but they had their own strategy of exposing endpoints, their own standards, and so on and so forth. The Skype for Business team was doing the same thing. And you can imagine how much of a more or less labyrinth ended up being to actually use and implement those applications inside your own app, right? Now, when it comes to configuring your Azure AD applications, or basically your service principals, you register them no matter what. Whatever portal you will be using, either the Azure Management Portal or the Azure Ibiza portal or the newer one, what you will end up doing is you will specify, for example, for your web applications, a reply URL and an application ID URI, which uniquely identifies the application inside your Active Directory. So there cannot be obviously 2 service principals with the same ID, because they have to be somehow uniquely identified. The reply URL is going to be used to uniquely identify that the request, once the authorization code is retrieved, goes back to the web browser, and the web browser, the user basically, is returned to a correct application. So if somehow there's a man-in-the-middle attack on the client side, there is no other malicious kind of application which would be able to retrieve the authorization code and request the access tokens and the refresh tokens on behalf of the user. And that's an awesome point. That's just the first layer of security, if you ask me. Inside Azure Active Directory, we also have the concept of a single-tenant application and a multi-tenant application. The terms should be fairly easily and comprehensive just by looking at those, right? Single-tenant application, it's available to all the users inside the directory. It's not available, obviously, to users outside the directory, and it's more or less typically for internal apps or internet apps within your organization and used for your organization's users. While a multi-tenant app would basically be leveraged or provisioned to users within the directory, but built by independent software vendors, especially for the situation where there's a software as a service offering, where each and every single user should have the option, and especially the admins, for example, they should have the option of adding delegated privileges to an application to all the users within their own tenant part of the directory. Now, you could ask yourself right now, what's a delegated permission? There are two types of permissions when we talk about Azure Active Directory, and you'll see this a lot throughout the documentation and throughout the entire conversation and articles online. There's the concept of delegated permission and an application permission. So let's see what these are. First, delegated permissions is the situation when the user of the application consents the application-specific permission to act on the user's behalf. What happens is when you have a web application and the user will log into the application, will log in using his username and password on the Azure Active Directory site, basically on that login.microsoftonline.com website you've probably seen before. He is involved in the entire workflow of the OAuth 2.0 protocol. But there are situations where the application has no UI, like a Windows service, like a console app, for example. The service principal should still have access to the users, in most scenarios, to the user's resources, the SharePoint Online files, or whatever APIs or endpoints or secrets or data your own API exposes. There obviously cannot be a way in this scenario where there is no UI, either for API or for the service, Windows service which invokes the API, for the user to consent the usage of his own resources. In that scenario, the application will be using application permissions where the app itself or the service principal has permissions and they act independent of the user. So the user does not get involved in the entire workflow back and forth. The consent window, you might have seen this before, it looks just like this. When you consent, and when you log in, as soon as you have used a valid username and password, Azure Active Directory will, on one hand, tell you what the application registration is on its side, on the directory side, so that you should give consent, hey, this is indeed the application I know that I will use. It's not any other application. And number two, it will tell you beforehand, hey, this application requires to have access and will have access, full access, for example, to your files, to your shares, to your contacts, to your calendars, and so on and so forth. And if you accept, and only then will Azure Active Directory generate a request which redirects you back to your original application which you were using, but send alongside that authorization code. And with the authorization code, the website, the back server side of the web application will request that it's something which just happens between the web app, where the web server and AAD. It will request with the authorization code and its own application ID and its application secret all the tokens which uniquely represent and are on behalf of the user. Now let's go again through that interiorization flow, through the entire flow, because I just grasped really fast through it. So again, what you have here are different set of endpoints. There's the application itself on the extreme left side. Then there's the authorization endpoint, the token endpoint, and the Graph API. In this scenario over here, the Graph API represents the resources, the secreted or the safe resources which the user does not have access or the application does not have access to before the user consents access. So how does it work? Well, the application requests the authorization code on the authorization endpoint. The authorization endpoint would basically be Azure AD. There is a sign-in browser pop-up. The user types in the username and password. He consents. He goes through that information. So it returns an authorization code. The application takes the received authorization code and requires or requests an access token from the graph, for example, from the token endpoint. And the token endpoint will return the token back, tokens back. It's actually a set of tokens, and I'll explain the tokens in a bit. Now, using that tokens, one of those tokens is an access token, which is your bearer token. With that, you, the application, more actually, is doing stuff on behalf of the user. And it can do anything the user has given consent to. In this scenario over here, the application will just request information using the Graph API, which I'll explain in a second. And the Graph API will just return back the result of that particular query. Now, I did mention a lot of tokens. First, there's the idea of a context token, which only represents the information about the resource owner and the client that can be used to get an access token later. The resource owner itself is whatever holds the secret information or the information which was made secret by using AAD. Then the refresh token goes alongside with the access token hand by hand. Basically, the access token, and you're just skipping for a second the refresh token, the access token is the token passed the resource server authorization the client to access the resources. So using this access token, which is going to be sent out as an authorization header, part of the request, the application will act on behalf of the user. So as long as there is an authorization column, bearer space, and something which represents the access token, the application is basically authorized on behalf of the user to do anything. But again, from a security perspective, this particular access token should be very short-lived, because if there's a man-in-the-middle attack and somebody figures out what the token is, they shouldn't have that much time window or space to run requests, valid requests on behalf of the user. And I would actually urge you to make this access token if you have, if you ever find yourself in a position to spin up and provision your own OAuth 2.0 authorization server. Only make it very short-lived. And it's the same thing with Azure AD. It's very short-lived access token. And in order to make it reusable, you'll have to use a refresh token. The refresh token is also sent alongside when you first log in and when the server actually requests using the authorization code the tokens from AAD, and it will store that information, the refresh token, and it will use it to get a new access token back so that the application can still act on behalf of the user without asking the user to log in over and over and over again. Now, the authorization code was obviously mentioned a few times, so that should be fairly easily understandable. One thing to remember, though, is that the context token and the access tokens are JWT tokens, so JSON Web Tokens, so to say, which is another way of saying that there will be that is an encoded information. So if you just go to JWT.io, for example, which is one of the popular decoders, online decoder tools for JWT tokens, you'll end up seeing that that is a plain text only encoded. You might ask yourself, okay, but what about security? I'll explain that in a bit, so don't worry about it. The bearer token, or the concept of bearer token, which in this case is your access token, is for the application to use and act on behalf of the user. As long as there is an access token, the application which possesses it only represents and acts on behalf of the user. It should always use SSL, because OAuth is by design dependent on the SSL protocol and the on HTTPS, basically, right? And they should never expose the tokens in JavaScript, because once you expose it in JavaScript, obviously anyone can just look at the JS script file and it will figure out what the access token is. So they will have, even for a short window and for a very short time frame, they will still have access to access user secrets. So that should normally only work from the client, from the server side, always, no matter what. But even if the access token does get compromised, it's limited by the expiration. The refresh is only done by the refresh token. Now, if the refresh token for the other, for whatever the case is compromised, the damage is still limited. because in order to get a new refresh token or to retrieve another set of tokens, you still need number one, the authorization code, which is specific to the user, to the application, and to that login session. So as soon as login has occurred and the tokens have been retrieved, the authorization code is no longer good. And second, the tokens is only retrieved by using, alongside with the authorization code, the application ID and the application secret, or client ID and client secret, same thing. Now, obviously, those should be parameters which are maintained as an environment variable on your runtime environment, nothing more than that, right? Now, I do know this might have been a bit technical, a bit too deep, but I've seen so many people get confused about the different tokens. What's this? What's that? Where are the security principles? What's the security policies? Should I be concerned of this? Should I be concerned of that? No, you shouldn't. The implementation is really, really good and really, really tough. I was mentioning earlier about tokens being JWT tokens, so that basically means that you can decode the tokens. The moment you do that, you end up seeing this JSON file where we have various parameters and properties basically representing the user principal. What's the user's family name, the given name, what's his ID, what's his tenant ID, what's his unique name, and things like that. You might ask yourself, okay, but isn't that a problem? Because if it's plain text, I mean, come on. Well, no, to be fairly honest, no, because in the end, as a suffix, if you want, after the JSON object, there's a signature, which is basically a calculated hash, and the algorithm which is used is still exposed as an AUG parameter, part of another JSON object inside a token. But then again, it's only AAD which knows how to calculate that information correctly. So if you were to change the JWT token, your access token, for example, to represent another username and force yourself into being another username or part of the different domain, the signature obviously wouldn't match. So that would be an invalid token, and AAD would always, 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 by all means, ignore that and not let your request go through because it's not a valid request. Good. Now, when it comes to application, like I mentioned earlier, all your HTTP requests will include this valid OAuth2 access token in the header. The header key basically is authorization, just like you know, because it's part of the standard, and it's a bearer token, so you'll get the base64 encoded JWT token, access token over there. What I'm thinking right now is any application which is capable of sending out HTTP requests, well, obviously web browsers, or native or mobile clients or whatever the case, or even any application you develop by yourself and is using an HTTP client, part of a library or a module or whatever programming language or framework you want to use, there's a different word for that, right? Great. Now, when it comes to Azure AD and gathering that information, you might also be in a situation where you're trying to impersonate a user or an application and thus require access tokens from the server side without invoking the user. It's almost like the same idea of an application permission when you have to write code for it. There is a library called ADEL, Active Directory Authentication Library, which is specific to multiple languages. Obviously, C# and the .NET Framework is part of that offering. And you just install it as a NuGet, and here's a short snippet code on how you use it. And then eventually, the most important part here is sending out the acquire token async method, calling the acquire token async method towards a particular resource, which is the secured down resource server owner, specifying the credential and the user ID, which in this case is only your application ID and application secret sent out as a special object called a client credential. Not gonna dwell too much in that area. I'd still want to mention the Graph API I was talking about earlier. So before the newer Graph API, the state of the world was something like this, and this more or less still is confusing for many people. What's an MSA account, Microsoft account? What's a work organizational account or school account or whatever they call them, because there's so many different names and they keep on changing those. Second, what's with all the services? There is OneDrive versus OneDrive for Business. There's Skype versus Skype for Business and many others. The problem back then was that everything was designed on a particular scope. MSA accounts were for personal usage, work and school accounts were for organizational usage, for whatever you would do within the company. The second problem, though, was that some services were only accepting personal accounts, MSA accounts, even though They were specific to the organization. Greatest example, Azure. When Azure first came out, you could only create an Azure subscription by using an MSA account, which is the personal account. Now, how crazy is that? You obviously see where the entire confusion started and why we ended up in sort of a complex situation where when people log in and type in the username, for example, which ends up being the email most of the times, every now and then they're asked, is this a worker school account or is this a personal account? And half the times, most people choose the incorrect option there. Now, besides that, as they were calling their services more or less the same, Skype versus Skype for Business, SharePoint, OneDrive versus OneDrive for Business, and so on and so forth, you would normally expect those services to have the same set of endpoints. Well, guess what? That was not really the case. If you look at this slide, for example, OneDrive for Business, its APIs were actually on top of SharePoint. So if you wanted to retrieve your files, it was something like whatever your tenant was, .sharepoint.com /personal / whatever your domain was / API, then version 2.0, then Drive. Compare that to the OneDrive API, which was not only a different host name, but a completely different strategy and architecture towards the organizational endpoints. Now, it was just crazy if you ask me. And it's the same story with the profile, for example. Either the one which is stored in SharePoint versus the one which is stored in Windows Live. Windows Live used to be the name for MSA, so don't get confused. Hang on with me. Same story goes with the Azure Active Directory Graph API, which has its own set of endpoints for the Graph API stuff, which is just another thing. So it was super confusing. Now, in today's world, what they did is they came up with this idea of a Graph API 2.0, which works on top of a single host name, which is graph.microsoft.com, works with both work and school account and personal accounts as well, and basically is a wrapper around all the services. So whenever there's a new service, like Microsoft Teams, for example, which is one of the rocket, super cool, have-to-use services right now, if you ask me, basically the team behind Microsoft Graph just takes all the REST APIs and more or less creates a recipe so that the endpoints use the same strategy on top of Graph API. So whenever you want to retrieve any information from Microsoft Teams, you call out the graph.microsoft.com specific version, particular version, whatever the case, and call out Teams in the same endpoint strategy and the same endpoint layout as other services do have. So, for example, now we have a single API for accessing data. If you have graph.microsoft.com /me, that retrieves your own profile from within your Azure Active Directory or your profile for your MSA account, depending on who's logged in. Or /users, that would retrieve everybody who sits underneath you in their organizational chart. Now you might ask yourself, okay, where's that information coming from? Remember when I was saying that there is a hybrid connectivity between your on-prem AD and your cloud, on-prem AD, sorry, and your cloud Azure Active Directory? Well, it's the same information which actually gets replicated up in the cloud, and that information will be exposed through the Graph API with this /users endpoint. Same goes with groups. Or show me my emails. No matter whether you're logged in with an MSA account or work organizational accounts, you only type in graph.microsoft.com /messages and you retrieve your emails back. And there's OData support as well, so that you can type in things like get me the top messages, top 10 messages, skip the first 5, give me the next 10, and things like that. Then there's traversing data as well, which is like the actual concept of a graph. Give me the drives and the items, give me the ID of the items, and give me the user who has last modified that information, because it might be on SharePoint, for example, where you let multiple users access the data based on whatever RBAC, role-based access control privileges, and so on and so forth. Insights, for example. If you've been using Delve, Delve is just one of the awesome UIs on top of this Graph API stuff, and accessing insights. So you could do things like, so I send out an email through my organization, and I'm wondering, because I've sent it out to the entire organization, who read it, who sent replies, who forwarded it over to somebody else, who started having a conversation on top of my original email, and things like that. That's part of the insights. You may add a file to, for example, to a publicly exposed SharePoint, and then you just need to retrieve information on how popular the file is. Now it's this insights API endpoint, a set of endpoints, which do exactly that. And as I said, this works for both the work and school accounts and personal accounts, the MSA accounts. Awesome. Good. Then the profile API, which is yet another cool stuff, works on top of this graph approach where you could say something like /me gives you your own profile, or /me/manager, which will give you the profile of my manager or your manager, or /users will give you the direct reports who sit underneath you. So you get the idea of this graph API and how you can directly access somebody based on whatever the approach is. And the entire intelligence story about Graph API is that you're using this one wrapper, one host name from within your application to gather insights, rich relationships and insights from all the various services and offerings Microsoft has to offer in the cloud ecosystem. I was saying there is a unified API style, a single endpoint, and here are just a bunch of different endpoints listed out. It obviously, by all means, these are not all of those. It just tries to give you out a better understanding. I see there's a question. The question reads, what is Microsoft's Easy Auth and how does that work? Seems that ASP.NET Forms Auth was old default in Visual Studio, but latest ASP.NET Core has default no auth, but needs more info on how to hook up to AAD. Oh yes, I feel your pain. There have been throughout time so many different approaches, so many different stories with identity, with impersonation, with this and that with Microsoft. I myself, I'm a software developer at heart, and I just got rid at some point with dealing with all that crazy information about updating your SQL tables which store your usernames, and then there comes this new update to your web forms authentication, and then here comes ASP.NET membership, and then here comes ASP.NET identity, and this and that and that, and a lot of shifts, and you have to recreate your application. It's just, oh my god, don't even get me started. I'll be honest though, those scenarios do make a lot of sense for some certain particular applications, especially when you want to be responsible first of the security, and second of the entire login workflow, custom things you want to do. However, inside Azure Active Directory, there is this idea of business to consumer. We're just taking the entire power of Azure Active Directory and expose that within your application so that people can log in, can register, can do stuff like that within their own app. Now, I know you guys might not be fans of Real Madrid, but Real Madrid is just one of the awesome soccer teams here in Europe who decided to leverage Azure Active Directory business to consumer. And if you try right now to log in into Real Madrid, maybe just by the reason of a test or just by the purpose of the test, sign up as a user, you will see that the entire workflow is specific UI-wise, I mean visually talking right now, to Real Madrid. They're using their fonts, they're using their marketing style terms, they're using their whatever else, but it's underneath Azure Active Directory. So they're basically leveraging that power of scalability, which allows 1.3 billion people to authenticate, or to 1.3 billion applications to happen per day, right? Can any application you will develop which leverages ASP.NET Identity do that? Well, yeah, sure. If you have the power of Microsoft, why not? But otherwise, if there are no legal concerns about it, I would really urge you to look into Azure AD B2C, give it a shot, and let Azure and Microsoft handle the entire story about, well, Facebook just changed its SDK and API for logging in with Facebook accounts, so you have to update your app. No, you don't. You will not have to update your app. Somebody else at Microsoft will have to do it for you, right? I hope this does answer your question, and I know I've taken a very long shift from your original question, but I do hope it answers your question. Now, there's only so much time left for the demo, so there's a bunch of things, a couple of things I will try to do. First, there is this graphexplorer2.azurewebsite.net URL, which is really, really, really cool, and I will try to show you that in a second. Yeah, so there we go. Awesome. I'm just opening up my favorite web browser, and what you see here right now is, in fact, I will just really fast go back to these endpoints in particular, and let me show you, for example, what happens within the application when within this app I can use either a demo tenant or I can just sign in with my own username and password. I'm not going to do that because there's just a lot of headache with my MFA things and so on and so forth. So what I could do is I can just send out this particular request, and when it returns, it shows me the response specific in a JSON object for whatever the demo tenant is, right? Want to retrieve information specific to, I don't know, this Alex's manager? Just type in me/manager, hit go, and there you have it. This is the profile of the manager. One, for example, to retrieve the calendar events of this Alex Darrow user, /me/calendar, type in, hit the go button, and there you go. There is a particular calendar with whatever operations there are. Want to retrieve the messages? Just type in messages, hit go, and boom, there we go. Oh, there's a bad request. I typed in something. Messages, I think it's, yeah, typo. Sorry about that. Hit go, and there you have it. There are a bunch of emails with all their different properties, when the message was received, when it was sent, whether it's an internet message ID, what the subject is, and things like this. Obviously, plainly comprehensible just by looking at it. Now, second, the other thing I wanted to show you is this awesome, cool demo experience, sort of a sandboxed environment where, yet again, you can either use a sandboxed account or your own account, and it goes like this. First, you have to authorize, and what I'm going to do now is I will use the sandboxed account, the demo account, which has the password pastries101. If you just take your cursor over the using sandbox account button, it will just show you that, right? So the password, it was pastries101. I think I mistyped that, pastries101. Let me log in. There we go. And the moment I logged in, I retrieved the authorization code I was telling you earlier about. Now it's the application's responsibility from here to retrieve the tokens, but for the purpose of the demo, there's a button which does that. And the moment the application does that, it basically sends out a request, again, to log in Microsoft Online, common, OAuth2, whatever, token, right? And the response back is the set of tokens, the refresh token, the access token, and the identity token, the GWT token I was telling you about. Now, with this access token, the application can send out any request, whether that's to the a particular services API or to the Graph API or to anything which is secure down or made safe by the application, doesn't matter. So I could just say, calendar, get me all the events for today. And the moment I did that, I did select that operation. The URL has updated, so I can just send out the request and see that it also uses an all data operation and set of parameters. And the response retrieved back is yet again a JSON file which shows all the events for today. Now this is fairly easy and fairly comprehensible yet again. So hopefully once you got all the gizmos and all this mumbo jumbo more or less about the tokens and why there are so many tokens and how do the tokens and where do they fit in and how does AD use them, it's fairly easy to go forward and start from there. Yet again, another cool URL is this developer.microsoft.com/your location, any en-us, for example, and then graph. And if you just scroll down and try the quick start, this is an awesome example again, which would allow you to try out, gives you the actual URL, gives you the option of trying it out, and you'll see the response body retrieved by the Graph API. Now, the last part of my demo actually is happening in another tab within Azure directly. So within one of my subscriptions, what I did is I spinned up a resource group created called Cloud Identity RG. Doesn't matter what the name is that anyway. And there is this web application which I just spinned up. It's the default one. So if I just click browse right now, I will see the default page, default static HTML, which shows me that the application service has been created. And just think of this as a web app which exposes static HTML content. What I would want to do next is to allow my people to have access to this set of static resources only if they logged in. Now, rather than implementing, just like you said earlier, Paulo, rather than implementing web forms, ASP.NET Membership, ASP.NET Identity, or anything else, I'll take the full power of Azure and Azure Active Directory. How do I do that? So if I were to go back to my application service, to my web app, I'll just drill down to settings, authentication authorization, and they'll specify that you have to be authenticated to use this application service. They'll just click on, and then I'll say whatever request comes in which is not authenticated, please use Azure Active Directory. And you can choose anything else because it's an application service feature. So it's both valid for mobile apps, for web apps, for logic apps, for Azure Functions, and for API apps as well. But I'm using it for a web app right now. So I will just configure Azure Active Directory. And because it's the full power of Azure with everything very nicely integrated, I can also choose the Express button, which would allow me to just choose a name, and the name of the web app is fine with me. I'll click OK, and what this does is it creates a service principal, basically registers the application within the directory, which in this case is called Key Ticket Solutions, whatever, configures that client ID or application ID and client secret or application secret be specified in this application and authorization configuration on the web app side. And once that's configured, because of this action to take when the request is authenticated setting, which says login with Azure AD, the host of my web app will redirect my unauthenticated users to the login window within Azure AD. So let's just try it out. Remember, inside this browser, I'm logged in, right? So if I were to copy this guy over, retry, I'm logged in because I already have the authentication cookie. Remember, single sign-on, that's what you want, right? But if I were to open up a different browser, such as this evil-looking browser, Chrome, I'm going to use incognito right now, so there is no cookie whatsoever. Same URL, typing it in, goes through, and there it goes. It requires me to log in with this very specific custom-designed and custom-branded login window for that particular directory, which in this case is KeyTicket, whatever the name is, right? Make sense? Hopefully, yes. There's another question coming in from Yusuf, which says, can we register SharePoint on-site using Express method for authorization? Well, yes, actually you can, because what you could do is make your application, but this does involve custom coding. So what I've shown you so far is only part of the application service feature and set of offerings from that service, application services. What you could do is do custom coding as well, where your authorization server, basically the endpoints where you log in and things like that, is Azure AD, and there's a very good documentation online on that on docs.microsoft.com. And as soon as you log in, your SharePoint Online or SharePoint On-site application will retrieve the authorization code and just yet again, like I mentioned earlier, alongside with the registered app inside the directory, request the access token and refresh token and so on and so forth, so that your SharePoint On-site application will be secured by Azure Active Directory rather than web forms, which makes a lot of sense if you ask me. Awesome, guys. I'm still happy to take some more questions because there, as far as I know, there's still time for that, roughly 5 minutes or so, at least. We can still take it longer if you so like. It will be my pleasure to do that, don't get me wrong. Other than that, guys, thanks so much. It's really an honor to talk about Azure AD and Azure altogether again. I'll still be around if there's any questions. Javier, would you take it from here?
All right, thank you, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely, anytime.
Looks like, all right. Well, you're very welcome, Kevin.
I am so sorry. You're still there? All right, still there? Okay, I'm getting weird.
Okay, looks like we do have a question from Paolo.
Yeah, there's a question from Paolo. He asks, if now using third party, for example, Google, does that mean that we developers don't need to do register or forget password and things like that? Well, yes, actually it does, because the user itself, so once you choose to have Google as your provider for everything authentication and everything authorization, mostly authentication, the users will just be self-maintaining or self-managing their username and password, right? So it's not up to you there to reset their Google account. It's up to them to reset their passwords. You're just using Google as a trusted provider for them to log in using their Google accounts. Awesome question. I hope that answers your question, Paulo. Awesome. Thanks so much, Paulo. Any other questions, guys?